three under 30s. Full disclosure, I'm not under 30. I'm 33, but I did start two companies under 30. And maybe Aaron, while we're waiting, dig in some background on, how old were you when you, started Carver Edison, and really what, did you from a young age think that you would start a company? Did you think it would be possible to do it alone? You have to partner with someone older.
Yeah, so deep sort of philosophical history on me. We'll rewind to when I was in college at Babson. If you were to just stop me and say, Aaron, if you could only do one thing, what would you want to do? My answer would have been, I want to change the way something is done. I couldn't have told you kind of what it is or how it would end up happening, but that was something that it was always interesting to me. And then right out of college, I had the incredible opportunity to go be the first employee at a startup institutional investment shop, which was run by two amazing women who are legendary investors. And I was fortunate to see the good days when you have a co-founder, but also the bad days. And I knew eventually, as Carver Edison came together, that we had such a big regulatory ladder to climb that was the most important thing we could do. And it would be really hard to find sort of a co-founder who was up for that ride, which I thought would take 6 months. It took 2 years plus. So when I started working on Carver Edison, this was probably late 2014. I was maybe 21, 22. And it took me about 2 years to actually create the product, create and figure out the mechanics of cashless participation before I even realized that there was a business to be built around it. Because first I had to figure out how it would work. And then once the product was actually built, I kind of had to bet all the chips on my understanding of securities law, broker-dealer law, and tax law to figure out whether or not it was even possible. Because it's one thing to go to the regulators. Here's Drew. It's one thing to go to the regulators and say, hey, regulators, this is what we're trying to do within the framework. Help us get comfortable, or we're going to help you get comfortable with it. It's a whole different thing to try and build around a business around change in the law that's needed. And changing the law takes a really long time. So basically, after I built the product, then I'd say, okay, can we do this without changing the law? My thinking was yes, but then it was just a matter of going out and executing and getting things like the private letter ruling we got from the IRS. So to me, it was really an advantage to start working on the company when I was really young, really early in my career, because number one, that comes with sort of a youthful optimism that allows you to sort of bear some of the pain. But number two, just from a personal life perspective, I'm not married, I don't have kids. So for all the years it really took to build out the technology and the product, it allowed me to go 150, 200% all in on that might not otherwise be possible at a different stage in life. So I think actually being young, especially in the fintech world where there is a big regulatory tail, is a competitive advantage. And I would say if you're up for a good challenge, do it while you're young.
I'd second that.
Well, welcome, Drew. Maybe we take a few minutes for introductions now that everyone's here. I'm Jeff Cruttenden. I'm over 30, but I'm in this group because I started a company when I was under 30 called Acorns, and another company called Say. Acorns is a micro investing platform, and Say powers shareholder communications. And today I'm co-founder of a new venture fund called Treasury, investing in early stage fintech. I'm joined by Aaron Shapiro and Drew Sterrett. Aaron's founder and CEO of Carver Edison, and Drew is founder and CEO of LEX. I'm an investor in both companies, but I'll let them introduce themselves. Aaron, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Aaron Shapiro here, founder of Carver Edison. We're a fintech company based out of New York that works with publicly traded companies to help drive stock ownership for their employees. At a really high level, we created something called cashless participation that makes it possible for the world's public company employees to own stock in their company, regardless of their ability to actually afford to buy that stock. We've been lucky to do some amazing things. One of the things that I think we're most proud of is we've been able to finally make it possible after 60 or so years for ordinary, hardworking people to own stock in their company. And in a case study we just released with E-Trade, turned about $3,700 into $14,000 in 6 months. So that's us.
Great. Drew, you want to jump in?
Sure. Actually, pretty similar story to Aaron, also in fintech, based in New York. Aaron, it's good to see you. It's been a little while. Hope you've been safe and healthy. What we've done at LEX is create the first commercial real estate securities market, providing liquidity and access to both real estate owners and investors of all types. So everyone from retail, both accredited and non-accredited, up to your RIAs, financial advisors, private bankers, and financial institutions, to have a public and liquid market into an asset class where very few ever were able to participate.
And how old are both of you, just for the sake of the title of this group?
28 as of October.
I beat Drew by a month there. 28 as of September. Climbing the ladder.
All right, so you're in your late 20s. All right. And when did you start your companies? At what age were you both at?
So officially for me, it was 24, but I've been working on it for a couple of years before that.
Got it. So you were thinking about it and then pulled the trigger when you were 25 or 24?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Drew, before you came in, Aaron was bringing up some interesting points around, one of the benefits of being young, less burdens around family and mortgages and other things, and how that can, those are beneficial ingredients to starting a company. He also brought up sort of starting with a product focus and then stepping back and building a company around that. Curious, your thoughts on that, Drew, and maybe we start, Aaron, you can follow up on sort of this point of, an opportunity for young people to start fintech companies, especially, sort of product first type businesses.
As Aaron nicely put it, ignorance is bliss, right? And that's what allows you to continue to tackle and tackle and tackle, especially when you have people telling you time and time again, you can't. It could never happen. It can't be done. And so I agree. I fundamentally believe that actually sort of having a fresh look at how these different financial sectors have been structured previously and taking a new approach. And so it's not ingrained that it has to happen one way. This is the way that it's always been done. It can't be moved or changed. Mm-hmm. So they're coming in with a clean slate and then really actually just doing problem solving, where you're solving equations left, right, and center. And they're multivariable since they plug into a much bigger picture. But when you break it down sort of step by step, you're able to actually accomplish the end goal, which is disrupting different industries and actually accomplishing what other people said you never could do.
Mm-hmm.
And Drew, you spent a couple of years in institutional real estate before you started the company, right?
Yep. No, that's actually what got the company started, because I saw how the industry was working, all the problems, and also wanted access, but had no available option. So it was really personal desire. And that really drove actually the beginning of the company, where I was like, I'm structuring these deals, but I don't have a couple $1 million to place in any single investment. This is ridiculous. How do one of the oldest and largest asset classes in the world and one of the largest wealth creators, no public and liquid market? And then you find out that even anything to do with property technology or commercial real estate or real estate in general, we had artificial intelligence funds before we had real estate focused funds. This is hilarious.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point because, and I think you'll notice a theme here. I came out of college and I spent a couple of years in the institutional investing world and had a chance to do basically the same thing, to spend time looking at some of the biggest opportunities out there, saying, wait a second, like this is crazy. So when I came across these weird esoteric things called employee stock purchase plans, I knew that the hedge fund managers and beyond that I was spending a lot of time with would kill to have access to this thing. And it sort of validated the inefficiency and the opportunity because I had spent time in that part of the world. And I think to Drew's point as well, coming out of college and getting a couple years in a particular sort of sector will give you the knowledge to at least know that there's an inefficiency there. Executing on that inefficiency is a whole different ballgame. But I think specifically in the fintech world, actually spending a couple years early in your career embedded in the industry will give you and open your eyes to a world that you might not otherwise know is out there. So I would definitely encourage folks who are early in their careers right now to either think about some of the opportunities you've had historically in a particular asset class, or even if you're really early in your career, maybe just in college, think about things you're interested in and what opportunities you might be able to pursue to get a year or two of experience at the institutional level in one of those asset classes.
No, Aaron, I completely agree. And that fundamental base is where you get to sort of identify what's wrong and what can be made better. Yet you're not so ingrained where you're sort of beaten down and you're like, oh, we can't make any changes, since it's really more of the yes, we can make anything happen attitude. And it's just, we don't have to keep the status quo.
And so, hey, by the way, I can't see either of your faces. It's my computer issue, so pardon me if I jump in at weird times because I'm just going off of sound. Getting enough experience to know there's a real problem to work on, but not too much to get discouraged to actually start something. I think is an interesting point. I had to get licensed when I was starting Acorns. I imagine you guys had to get licensed. All of us built broker dealers. Every person I talked to when we were looking to build Acorns, said, don't build a broker dealer, because everyone that had a license knew it was a big pain. I was focused on the product and knew that we had to own that to build a better product, and was sort of naive enough to dig in on this 2-year process. Can you guys dig in on sort of your experience going through the licensing, and maybe for founders or investors out there? Can you start something if you don't have the license initially? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so from my perspective, we're a little bit unique because what we're doing is just not an off-the-shelf brokerage account, much like Drew has done. So let's start with the testing side of it. If you want to run a broker dealer, you need people with the right exams. FINRA has an entire set of exams, but basically it's some combination of the 7, the 63, and the 24. You can either hire those people or you can have the great pleasure of taking those tests yourself. In my case, I've sort of done a hybrid of both, because it's sort of a balance. When you're building a company, there's a lot of things to focus on, and these tests are really hard tests. They require some serious study time behind them. So we've sort of done a hybrid model where we've brought in some outside experts, 20 years experience running broker dealers, and then I've taken a couple of these exams myself. I know Jeff and I talked about it a little bit in the preview video. The nice part about it is there's a very defined path to follow, which, especially in startup life, is one of the only places where there is a defined path you can follow. You just got to decide what's right for you, because especially if you don't necessarily have a background in finance, a test like the Series 7 is a big lift. A test like the Series 24 is a big lift. So everyone's a little bit different. Every company is a little bit different, but I say it's really just sort of a personal and business choice about that buy versus build trade-off.
Drew?
Yeah, so we took the approach where we actually became a branch office of a broker dealer first, just so we could get everything up and running initially without going through the 180-day FINRA process and putting everything together. So basically, to accelerate a step into sort of parallel path, we sort of took two different approaches, which was go under another broker-dealer first to build out the platform so we could have functionality in the very beginning. And then at the same time, actually had two of our team members. I was not one of them. One of my co-founders is one of our 24s. And then luckily, I did not have to take the 24. And actually, to be honest, I did U5 myself just for operational reasons because I didn't have a 24 and couldn't sit on the board of the company. It's one of those weird FINRA rules that you just have to work around.
Yeah, and if the 24 wasn't painful enough already, if you want to take the 24 now, it's I think a 6-hour exam, and they only offer it in person. So now you have to take it with a mask on for 6 hours.
I had to take the 24, so I had to take and pass the 7 and 24 before we launched, because I was one of the. We had some people that came in. I couldn't act as one of the principals, but I had to be in a position to operate the business, and sort of like we didn't have enough time to consider an alternative, and I'd actually failed my 24 the first time I took it. This is like not very far from launch, because it's very different than the 7. It's not an intuitive test at all, and the second time I took it, we had like weeks to go. I wouldn't have been able to retake it in time for the company to launch. It was immensely stressful. But actually, the experience of going through that testing for me helped me understand where the sort of more experienced people were coming from, some of the compliance team members. I know this is like a super exciting topic for everyone attending and listening in. We will move on from getting licensed, but it's interesting from like a young person's perspective, looking to start something. And I think actually making the effort to dig into the rules and get a license, even if you don't keep them necessarily, goes a long way to start having more confidence in building the business. Did you find when you were recruiting people, so you have this vision, you're this young guy, what was the interview process like, trying to recruit talent to an early stage fintech, trying to find experienced talent? Aaron, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, I mean, hiring is always exceptionally hard. Finding that right person takes a lot of time, and you certainly learn along the way. I think for us, what we come down to is just sort of a core set of personality traits that for us in our business, we've found yields a very specific kind of person. Number one is just intellectual curiosity, people that are naturally just curious people. Number two, people that have just horsepower behind them, people that can put the team on their back at 3 a.m. and get something to the finish line. And number four, people that are really good communicators, because, and we see it now, especially with what's going on where people have to work remote. You don't want to spend a lot of time helping everyone understand what needs to be done. That the conversations need to happen really quickly, so you can actually spend time solving some of these complicated problems. That the worst case scenario is you spend more time talking about what needs to be done than actually building a solution to that problem. So hiring is always tough. It always takes a lot of time. But we've really focused on just kind of personality traits that we think kind of scale well over time.
Mimic everything Aaron said, and the only thing that I would add is shared vision, right? Because especially when you're an early team, let's say you're pre-product or you're building out new products and you're in the beginning stages, so let's say pre-seed, seed, series A even, you sort of are all moving towards this like a North Star like goal that really empowers and sort of enables them to put the team on their back and put in even founder level hours to make sure that the job gets done well, and that they own their verticals and they really feel a part of something greater than themselves.
Very inspiring. Um, yeah. So, I found it really challenging, I guess, in the early days, because you're building when you're a young founder in fintech, you're building businesses that rely on trust. You're handling money, and you really need to tap into a lot of experience. And yet, if you see things differently, which your founder generally does, and is the reason you're starting something, getting people to join you, it's challenging. There's in the early days, it's not like there's a long line of people trying to join too. So I mean, in terms of being selective, it's like it's not just saying no to a bunch of people that aren't perfect fits. It's finding someone that can actually help teach you a bit. But something I want to sort of move to from talking about recruiting and licenses and things like that is connecting with peers and other founders. When I was a younger founder, I actually felt pretty disconnected from other founders in fintech. I guess at the time, other fintechs were all sort of positioned as potentially competitive to Acorns. And as I've gotten older, I've since connected and made friends with other founders in New York and other cities, and even partnered with Eli Braverman, who co-founded Betterment, to start Treasury. How do you feel sort of like being younger sort of opens you up? And I know as you get older, you meet more people, you have more connections. But, is it lonely as a young fintech founder?
Drew, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I'll say yes in the beginning.
Okay.
And then as you get to know this space and you get to meet people who are also working in similar verticals, you sort of make good friends. And actually, in my case, also good advisors and mentors who have been there and sort of gone through similar processes. So I think it evolves over time. And it's sort of the same way the company develops, you're developing and you're also growing your own internal fintech network in this case. So I would say in the beginning it was hard, but overall, especially if you put yourself out there and you ask for help, everyone's almost always willing to give advice and to help. It's a very different ask than if you were asking for money or something else. And
hate to interrupt, gentlemen, but it might cut out at 10:30. Sometimes these do hard cuts or 10:30 my time. So just a heads up that probably a couple more moments left.
So just really quick, completely agree with Drew. I think one of the things that happens is early on, you're really focused on just actually building the business, and then you kind of build it and you have a little bit more time to sort of ask people for help. But to Drew's point, ask for help. You'd be amazed at how many people say yes.
I think that's a good point. I mean, when I was younger, or I guess which is all of my experience, but asking for help when you're a young founder, I think is more difficult because there's this sense that maybe you're second guest and you need to demonstrate the sort of like expert knowledge around things. How do you, if each of you can jump in, like who's sort of your chief mentor that you would consider when you decided to start your business, and sort of as you evolved it, the person that you've been able to ask dumb questions of?
In my case, I've been really lucky to have Eli Braverman of Betterment to sort of be that resource for me, who's fought battles, who's spent a lot of time navigating FINRA complexities, and also when he was building Betterment, there really wasn't much of a playbook. And Jeff, I imagine the same thing was true at Acorns because you guys were coming up kind of the curve at the same time. And now to have both of you guys, both Eli and Jeff, as resources to be able to call and say, okay, you've navigated the full cycle from this thing doesn't exist, we're going to create a new category, to now being able to look down from the mountaintops and say, wow, it's pretty cool, we built this amazing thing, is just an incredible privilege to be able to ask you guys stupid questions.
Well, you're too kind on that. But even before you met Eli, is there anyone else that you could call out? Or a family member?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it just comes back to sort of starting from the early days with my family, like gathering information, understanding the different potential outcomes, and making a decision based on that. Part of that is just, I mean, sports too played a really important role in that. I was a catcher on a baseball team. So from the time I was, a kid playing baseball, that had always kind of been a part of it. So yeah, I mean, over the years, there have been a lot of influential people along the way, teachers, coaches, people in the professional world. It's just funny how you look back one day and all the pieces kind of come together in sort of a weird way. And you can say, yeah, that person actually changed the trajectory that now makes it possible to do this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Drew?
I guess it's my turn now. So no, I mean, I think I have a number of different mentors and also sort of tackle each one of them for different verticals, right? Since we deal actually in a number of different spaces. And so from like a venture capital and sort of a leadership side, I have Alan Patrickoff, who actually led our initial financing round. He is not the one I go to with dumb questions. Jeff, I would say that's probably you. But then there were also people along the way. Actually, one of them who was a real estate expert actually ended up joining the team. He's been in the industry for the last 40 years, sits on public company boards, and he's like, I'm re-entering the arena. But he first started off as someone who I was going to for advice and feedback. And as we were going through it, it evolved into sort of really active engagement, active love, active like vision, and saw the potential. And so it's amazing how these relationships evolve.
It is. It's it's important to have some people that you can talk to and ask for advice, especially as young founders. And there's a lot of I think in fintech, there are a lot of founders that are tackling problems that maybe are somewhat superficial, and if they could actually dig in deeper to the history of finance or talk to experts, they can maybe tackle more significant problems. I know, at Acorns, I got to work with my dad, which is great to have a mentor and partner of someone that I trusted, but also someone who has this, deep experience in the industry. And I think as we, evolve, I've always gotten more and more interested in learning from older people in finance and people with sort of deeper and different experience. I guess this is sort of like the final question. How do you stay connected? I mean, you're innovating, but how do you sort of keep connected to, maybe the history of finance and make sure that you're, staying humble?
Well, I think just running company generally has a very special way of keeping you humble, especially.
I second that. Yeah. So like full-heartedly.
But also, what's cool, and this is to Drew's point, I mean, the people in your network that maybe provided you feedback and vision sort of along the way, at least in our case, are the ones who remind us when we're deviating kind of off course, which is really cool because what happens is the folks who were really supportive of the vision when it was just a vision, you can now bring into business relationships and say, hey, wait a second, like, why would you pull this lever when you can pull that lever? The second lever makes a lot more sense. So I think our reality check is being able to leverage that network and actually bring the people that supported us along the way into deals and say, hey, you guys supported us from the very early days. Now we want you to be part of the growth and the success. And that has a very, very impactful way of sort of keeping on course.
Drew?
I would just have to second everything he just said, because it is amazing how much cross-pollination and cross-overlap from the very beginning to even right now. It's sort of the same people that were guiding us in the room are now actually sitting in the room with us or on the other side of the table while working together. It's an amazing feeling and experience. And even though they may have a couple of decades on you, you're on even playing fields.
Yeah, you know, there's a special place for the people that backed you before you had anything, and you know, took a risk on you, and it's good to stay connected to those people. Well, I know we're out of time. I hope this was an interesting conversation. I think it was. I appreciate you under 30s joining me. I keep getting reminded of my age as a founder. Maybe the next topic would be just not even digging into that. But yeah, and if anyone wants to ask questions or follow up, we're all plugged into to the Spark network, and so available for networking and answering questions. But with that, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Drew, so much for joining today.
Thank you, Jeff.